Welcome into the Volatile Podcast. Mac Williams, I'll be your host this evening. I'm here with my other good friends, Jeff Wright, Joe Davis, Nick Duncan. The Volatile Podcast is here to remind you that being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. Guys, we have a very special show tonight as we are doing our first ever, and hopefully last ever for me, punishment episode, where I will be eating 14 because a chain restaurant that provides wings that shall not be named only provided me with 14 wings instead of 15, even though I paid for 15. So, yes, I will be eating those tonight as we indulge in recapping on the Tennessee football season and also the couple of Tennessee basketball games. Listener, we're recording this on Wednesday evening right after Tennessee has beaten Georgia in basketball in overtime, 86-85. So, guys, I'm going to go ahead and start eating, and let's jump into the game.
Show us the
what
goods.
do we think about the game?
Show us the goods. Show us the goods.
Hey, I actually think that we should, we're gaining new listeners so rapidly. I think that we should remind people why Mac has to be punished.
Please.
I don't know. He gave us a stupid football bet. That's all I remember.
So it is, Mac Williams betting 101 that you always take Vols to cover the first quarter spread. And this is why Mac has to be punished, is because in our bowl game, we did not cover the first quarter spread, which Mac, just thumbs up, thumbs down. That was 1 point. We had to be leading by 1 point. Is that right?
We had to be winning at the end of the first quarter. Yep. It was a pick 'em.
It was a pick 'em. And we did not cover that spread. So.
And is that the only time all year we did not cover the first quarter spread, Mac?
No, there was a couple other games. Bama, Vandy. That's the only ones I can think off the top of my head, but there was a few.
Hey, enough about actual Vol stuff. Mac, since we're not going to name the restaurant, we'll just call it Bison Volatile Wings. What flavors might you have chosen for your punishment for Bison Volatile Wings?
So I was going to do all of the blazing, but you guys said let's do a little bit of variety. So I did the two hottest flavors they have, blazing and wild. I'm starting with the wild, which technically are supposed to be slightly not as hot as the blazing. So far, that bears true. I have had these flavors before, but not in this quantity.
Okay. So what's your heat level right now, scale of 1 to 10? I think you're
wing and a half
3.
in. Wing and a half in.
Yeah, wing and a half. This is my second one.
Oh.
I would say like a 5.
Okay. All right.
The other ones are hot though.
Yeah, I mean the fact they're called blazing and they have a challenge to eat them makes me think, yeah, I probably couldn't handle what you're doing.
Here's the question I have. Did they short you on the medium, on the lesser heat, or on the greatest heat?
Well, as a former math teacher, I'm going to let you think about that. If I ordered 15 and they shorted me 1.
Yeah, but which one were you supposed to get 8 of?
They don't specify.
Okay. Sorry,
Mac,
I should have been more clear with my question.
Mac takes a chicken wing like a piranha takes a cow who falls into the Amazon. It's just gone, dude.
I have nothing to hide.
We are like 3 minutes in, and this is my favorite episode.
Sorry, I'm completely derailing it, but like this is what I imagine a cannibal does when they're like finally deciding to eat their lost hiking partner.
This is the way Tennessee basketball's defense ate all night.
Oh, okay. Thanks for an off ramp, Nick.
Let's start with I think the guy that played the best tonight, as in terms of what we've seen him do so far this year, JP Estrella by far. JP Estrella had a great game tonight against Georgia, rebounded the ball well, scored the ball well early in the game and late in the game. Kind of had some rough moments in the middle offensively, but
classic Rick Barnes scoring drought right in the middle.
Yep. Yeah, I thought JP was just phenomenal tonight.
I agree. I thought he attacked the boards. I mean, they all did as a team, but Carey was not playing well, and JP really gave them what they needed inside. Akbar played good as well, but JP played good on both ends of the court. at different spurts. Played good defense the whole night, but attacked the boards. I mean, golly, man. I mean, they won that game on rebounds. I mean, They just ate on the glass, particularly the offensive end.
Well, before we leave Estrella, I was planning. I just assumed that we would probably lose this game. I haven't had a lot of confidence in the team lately, so I was going to get on here and talk about how beating the NBA team is kind of like the moral victory for our season, right? But I'll just tell you, boys, this is how we end up getting hurt again. Mint starting to figure it out, and Estrella returning to form bodes well for this team. If you could get Gillespie locked in where he's not making costly decisions, particularly late in the game, all of a sudden you start thinking these guys from Knoxville have a little life in them. I'm sure I'm going to get crushed for thinking that, but this is where I'm at.
Yep. Totally agree with you. Jacoby has got the one negative from the whole game is that I feel like I've been beating this drum for a few weeks, but Jacoby Gillespie is, Jeff said this off air, no pun intended, volatile. Like he will fill it up. You know, he was like 4 for 9 or 5 for 10 from 3, something like that. He'll shoot the lights out. But then the last 2 minutes of the game, he will come down and make the most boneheaded pass. He had a turnover late in the game that was dumb. He shot the ball at the end of the game with a deep 3 with 14 seconds left on the shot clock, and then turned around on the next possession after we got the ball back and dribbled around for 5 or 6 seconds at the top of the key, and then turned around and chucked up a terrible 3. And so you just got to eliminate some of those things there at the end of the game. But then he got the ball in the last possession of regulation and had a good look to try to win it. Couldn't get the floater to go, but had a good look. But Jacoby played well again. But yeah, he's got to eliminate those boneheaded plays at the end of the game. It's enough to make you pull your hair out if you have hair, which I don't.
This team seems, I don't watch basketball as much as you guys do. I've mentioned that on the podcast before, but my limited exposure to Tennessee teams, Rick Barnes teams in the past, this one, I know it's composed with a lot of freshmen. Is it like an, sort of uncharacteristically high amount of freshmen on this team in regards to years past? Is that true?
In key spots in the rotation, and it's not just freshmen. There's just a lot of new faces. Like that, the kid from Israel hasn't worked out at all, but they wanted him to. They've just got these guys. Why can't I remember names? But there's a guy who's in the rotation who plays sort of perimeter to post that I think they didn't even think was going to be a contributor this year. And so it's a team that still doesn't know each other very well, or maybe hasn't up until this point. So even if it's not super freshman-y, it's kind of the same sort of deal where you have guys who are playing together for the first time.
Yeah, I would be interested in doing some more research on this topic, or on this point that I'm about to make, because I don't know if it's true, because I don't watch enough Tennessee basketball, and I don't even know enough about the game to know that it's true. But this one just feels really undisciplined. Like there's a lot of good talent, and if they can, when they put together sort of a complete look, they could just dominate. But Nick, you mentioned those possessions by Gillespie down at the end of the game. There were like 2 or 3 where he had the ball, shot clock's running out, and he's dribbling around on the perimeter, and I'm screaming at the TV, do something with the basketball. Like you gotta, you're the announcers were saying, like, you're the quarterback of the basketball team. You got to know the situation. You got to know the shot clock, and you got to do something better than toss up a prayer with 0.2 seconds left on the shot clock. And there was another play where they were inbounding the ball, and he ran the baseline, and you can't do that in that particular situation because it wasn't off of a score or a timeout or whatever it was. So it's just little things like
you could only run the baseline out of bounds on a made basket, and it was a turnover. Or a foul one. I can't remember, but either way, he could run the baseline. So
it's just little things like that. You have a chance right there, and that's a key situation with, I think, less than 5 minutes to go in the game. You're up. You got the momentum. You got a chance to really start to put your foot on their throat and just take the life out of them, and you immediately turn the ball over. And you just kept giving Georgia life, which the game eventually goes into overtime. So it's just little things like that I it's just so frustrating to watch, because you feel like if they could just eliminate those kinds of mistakes, this team could really make a deep run. in the tournament. I will say on the flip side of the ball, Georgia also was making all kinds of boneheaded mistakes. I was digging Mac in the chat, just being like, "Oh, that was a bad possession. Oh, that was a gift," which I'll take because I felt like Georgia had a lot of opportunities to really steal a victory there at the end, and they couldn't seem to figure out how to put a good offensive drive together. And then, of course, the end of the game, just driving down and scoring 2 for us. Hey, we'll take that all day. So, I guess that kind of goes both ways, but I'd love to see him clean up the mistakes.
I'd like to pile on Jacoby further, but before we do that, Mac, how we doing, buddy?
Things are getting hot over here. My nose is running.
It looks a little redder.
Watering. Yeah.
Face is turning red. Face is looking a little red.
It's hot. I have 5 on the plate and 1 in my hand. So my strategy going in was don't eat fast, but just keep a nice, steady,
just pace yourself like you're running a marathon.
Right. I never stop running, just never stop. Just continue.
As part of this hazing, you're not allowed to have any water, no refreshing milk, right? Do you have any Cool Ranch sauces, anything like that going on over there?
No. I do have a glass of milk at the ready for when I finished or if I fail. But I'm really gonna I'm gonna do my best to finish these without touching it. So
we're gonna call that the fire extinguisher. So to pile on Jacoby on that the play you're talking about where he ran the shot clock out. Again, I'm old, but he caught the ball almost on the block and dribbled out to the corner, then dribbled to the perimeter to shoot a bad contested 3. And I hate that stuff. The contrast there would be, and he's a talented enough ball handler to do some of this stuff. Steve Nash was a master of just maintaining your dribble in the paint and finding somebody in the angle. But even, like Jordan made this famous, but the attempt to go out to the perimeter and then double back to the rim. I know he's small. He got his shot blocked a couple different times, but I'll take him going to the rim with a chance to either make a bucket or get a foul over him dribbling further out twice and then chucking one over at least one defender. The other thing is that after he did that, Nick was letting me watch the game on his phone. It looked like he went and argued with Barnes as Barnes was trying to be like, hey, do smarter things on the basketball floor. And Joe, you're talking about how this team is younger and, haven't played together a lot. Jacoby is an older player. This is the kind of stuff, like when he chucks up that 3-pointer with 14 seconds left, you need him to handle the ball. You need him to score. But one of the things you need him to do the most is be the cool head in clutch situations. And it stinks watching him thus far not be able to live up to that responsibility. Now,
yes.
He did play good D at the end of regulation.
He did. I was about to say he played good D there down the stretch. Really the whole game. I mean, hard to be upset with anything on the defensive effort and crashing the boards. They did not hit as many free throws as you would like, but they did hit some key free throws down the stretch. I think they were 15 for 25 from the stripe. So you want to be better than that. But hey, they did enough to get it done. I mean, really impressed with the way our defense has clamped down 2 teams in a row that really like to run the floor, get after it, shoot a lot of threes. And Tennessee's played good defense against Bama and Georgia back to back. So they keep that up and find some more offense, and they'll be on their way. And maybe Mac will live to get to watch them play.
Hey boys, it was a bad night to come painted up like a Smurf to Athens.
Although he made a killer shot at the end of regulation there. That was a great shot. But
Mac, I'd like for you to just take a moment while you're, got a few wings left and just tell us your thoughts on the game. Let's let that spice and seasoning marinate a little bit while you tell us what you thought.
Well, again, my biggest takeaway was definitely that that JP played amazing. I thought it was his best game. We had some good classic Felix moments where Felix was, getting nice putback dunks and things like that. Yeah, I mean, obviously it can't be said enough that we still have free throw issues down the stretch, and Jacoby has to be better in that regard. And also with turnovers down the stretch, and you guys have already hit on that really well. But we just have to have better play from our point guard, especially in late game situations, if we're going to make any sort of run when it comes to March. One thing I wanted to ask before we move on to transfer portal, does seeing the way that we played tonight back to back against the way we played against Bama, which we'll talk about that game a little more later, does that change your opinion, Jeff, on if this team's going to be a team that makes NCAA tournament or makes a run in the NCAA tournament?
Mac, you did an admirable job right there, and I'm now feeling bad for asking you to do that. I don't feel bad about the wings so much, but good night, dude. I can literally see the tears in your eyes.
Yeah, you look
Kudos
purple.
to you, my friend. I'm feeling kind of rotten.
Don't feel rotten.
I mean, yeah, I'll try. Yeah, the ceiling on this. This is what I said earlier about being hurt again. Like I'm tempted to say, oh, if we've got Estrella working and Immense found some semblance of a game, maybe they're maybe we would beat a Kentucky team with this set of scenario or this set of production. If we had to play them again, I've just been so checked out on this team. It's hard to let myself do that. But yeah, legitimately, I think the version we've seen the last two games. I'm not saying they're going to the Final Four, but they look like one of the better teams in the country.
Well, while Mac has steam rising from the top of his head, although he does only have one wing left after that one, so he's crushing it. Let's move on to the transfer portal. I will say these names, and then Mac can correct me once he gathers himself. But we did add three additions from the transfer portal. We have Ian Duarte. Okay. Wide receiver from Idaho State, a veteran guy, played a lot of football. We have Drake Martinez, a tight end from UT Martin. And then we have Jadeus Richard,
Nailed it.
Thank you. A new defensive back, probably a cornerback, coming from Miami. And played for Vanderbilt, then went to Miami, and now coming to Tennessee. Got his first start. I heard this on the VolQuest podcast, so I'll give them credit, but got his first start in college football against Tennessee when he played at Vanderbilt. And now he's come back to the state of Tennessee, going to wear the orange and white. So anything on these three guys? I mean, it looks like these look like depth adds to me, but we need more bodies. I think Indiana's proven that veteran guys, even from teams that are not, considered blue blood programs or even like big Division I programs, even if they're not blue bloods, that kind of depth can help and push everybody. A lot of competition, make people better. I think that's probably what we're looking at here. And so, anyone want to comment on the wide receiver, the tight end, or the defensive back that we have added from the portal?
Sure, I'll go.
2 or 3. Oh, go ahead, Mac. Let's hear it.
This is my last wing, so I'm going to milk it for you guys. Yeah, Jadeus Richard, man, I think getting another defensive back was a big thing for our defense. As you said, I don't know where he's going to fall on the depth chart, and it may just be a depth piece, kind of like you said. But I think Tennessee, and especially in the last couple of seasons, when you look at our defense and how we've played, you just can't have enough defensive backs. That's been a area of struggle for this team. And so I'm really glad to see them get another one and just add another body to that room. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, with him, I was listening to Pancakes and Bacon this morning, and they said there's a rumor with him that he hijacked the team, that he, at some point with Miami, he said he wasn't getting on the plane if he didn't get some kind of money. And that bothers me. But I'm just going to have to believe that either it's not true or Boo and Nico have taught Josh, to just say, okay, pal, then you don't get on the plane and make sure you have your locker cleaned out by the time we get home. Let's take a moment here, guys, and give Mac Williams a round of applause. Way to
Finger
go,
licking.
King.
I have
Good
my
job.
moist towelette at the ready. Thank you. No, Jeff, I want to just go ahead and jump back in on that because I mean that's a good point. I haven't finished pancakes and bacon. I started it this afternoon on the way home, but if that's true, let's just assume it's true. I already just don't even want this kid to be on the team. I would rather just him go because Josh Heupel has shown time and time again that he cannot handle the locker room cancer type player well. And so I would rather just not have the talent, whatever he can bring to the table, and just not deal with the drama.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think part of the hope is too that Jim Knowles, being an older guy and hopefully more old school, will be able to add some bulldog there that Josh Heupel hasn't before. So maybe you would hope that Knowles had a hand in saying yay or nay to bringing that guy in and had a conversation with him, and that he'll be able to kind of control everybody on that side of the football. So that's a little bit of hope that I have regarding that particular rumor. But I agree with Mac. Like, I think we've added 9 new bodies to the secondary. The secondary was clearly the worst part of the defense this year. A lot of that was, of course, because of injuries, which we've talked about.
And Tim Bates.
And, of course, cannot forget our buddy Tim, who's no longer with us. God rest his soul.
Thank God.
So probably a depth piece, but like Mac said, you can't have too many of those guys. We saw it this year. Guys get hurt. Ty Redmond stepped up and played, I thought, really well for a freshman this year. Hopefully he'll have a big step forward, and got TJ Metcalf and a host of other guys should be ready to go for this next season. But the tight end ad was kind of odd because we got rid of Van Dorselaer. We added a guy. Now we added another tight end. So, I don't know what that's all about, but hey, it just can't hurt, I guess, to have depth and have guys at various positions. So, wide receiver, veteran, who knows? Guys played a lot of football. Maybe you can get some meaningful snaps, push some of the other younger wide receivers, bring in some veteran experience. So
my read on him, Nick, is that guy's going to be our kick returner. That's what I expect from him. I think he plays in the slot, and you don't want Braylon Staley coming off the field at all. And so I'm just hoping that he spends his time securing kicks and making wise decisions with them.
Doing this, walking.
We interrupt this podcast to welcome our first sponsor, White Clover Heritage Farms. We thank you for the fresh raw milk. Your local farmer, Jeff Wright. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Cheers.
I hope it's helping, buddy. I hope it's helping.
Dude, the best is watching Mac use that thing like mouthwash. He just takes a drink, he's swirling it around.
You got to. I just feel bad for whoever listens to this on podcast form, because all they're going to hear is just me chewing throughout the entire episode and then me swishing milk around in my mouth. That's not going to be a fun listen. So I'm sorry, podcast listener. Check us out on YouTube.
I don't know. It's been a fun listen. I mean, I've enjoyed the visual too, but I'll take the listen. Mac, you're bright red, bro.
I feel not great, but that's okay.
You're about to feel better. You're about to feel better because we're going to talk about Tennessee dismantling Alabama and their professional basketball player.
Yeah. So, Leah, I'll just jump in here. I mean, Tennessee beats Bama last Saturday night with an NBA player on their team on the road, 79-73. I really feel like as a podcast, we nailed this game, to be honest with you. I know that we all picked us to lose, so in that sense we didn't. But near the end of the episode, we did say if Tennessee was to win this game, it was going to be, I think, exactly kind of how it played out. I thought it was in the 70s. Tennessee grinded it out, made Alabama play their style. Tennessee played a great game, specifically Nate Ament. I wrote on our notes, was this the Nate Ament legacy game? career high 29 points. Seemed to just have his way with Alabama's defense kind of whenever he wanted to. What do you guys think about Nate Ament in that game?
Exactly what you said. I mean, it looks like he's figuring out how to use his size. I mean, the dude is almost 7 foot tall, and it's like he finally realized it and stopped playing ankle deep in the floor. And so, knocking down free throws down the stretch. Did that again tonight, and so can't really say enough good things about Nate Ament. Playing good defense, getting after the ball, playing help side. It's like he's remembering that he's like a top 10 NBA draft prospect and is playing like it. So,
Hey, let me ask y'all's opinion on this, because this is just me kind of floating. I want to check my empirical sense of what's going on. It seems to me like Nate has embraced the mid range and like working close to the rim. Do you think there was a time earlier in the season where he was trying to demonstrate to scouts that he could play perimeter in the NBA? And that was part of the problem with him. And so when he finally decided to just go be good at what he's good at in college, kind of the light bulb came on? What do you think?
It's possible. It's possible. I doubt that he was probably thinking about like what would look good with scouts. I think probably more realistically what might be the same issue, like manifest itself in the same way, but maybe the underlying thing was that he didn't feel confident, or he didn't feel like he had the strength to be able to get in there and do what he's doing now. And so he was just settling for expanding his game. And maybe part of that same thing was like, and if I shoot more threes, then I, drive in and body people up and have a nice mid-range game. I will also show scouts that I can do this at all three levels, right? So I think it might have been both, but to me, more so it seems like either a lack of confidence or a fear of what he was getting into when it comes to college athletes and things like that down low.
What do you think flips the switch for him as you drink that sweet, sweet raw milk?
I'd like to think that it was Rick Barnes getting in his ear and getting the most out of his best player. I'd like to think that. I don't know that that's what it is. It could have been Nate Ament just, I think all the great athletes have that switch that they can flip, and they can choose to do that or choose to not. It usually just takes some sort of introspective thing to click where they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to go into this mode and do what I know I can do. And so maybe it was that. Maybe it was just Nate deciding I'm not going to be scared, or I'm going to stop being not confident, and I'm going to get in there. I'm going to play my game. And if I fail doing it, then so be it. Maybe it was that, but I'd like to think it was Rick Barnes. I think that's the best. I think that means the best case scenario for us as Tennessee fans. I would hate that, it just where everyone's just sitting around and Nate's just having to figure it out by himself. I'd like to think that, the coaches were able to help him navigate that and get him out of his funk.
Well, yeah, as frustrating as Rick Barnes' teams are sometimes, it's hard to deny that he is typically able to get the best out of his guys, and that he is able to especially coach up players individually and get the best out of them. And so I kind of agree with you, Mac. It seems like Barnes or somebody has coached him to say, if you'll work inside out instead of outside in, then you can do whatever you want. You're 6'10", use your length, use your height, use your jumping ability, and, work to the outside. And it just seems like, whether it's coaching or not, that he played like he didn't have confidence. And the last 3 games, really, it feels like the A&M game was kind of a switch flip for me. I mean, the Bama game was, I think, like what you're saying, the chance to be a legacy game. But the A&M game was, even though that was a nasty, sloppy game, that was like the first game you really saw him take over and start to be and play like who he can be and who he should be. I mean, he's on any given night the biggest dude on the floor, and he's super athletic, and it's just like he's either remembered that or been reminded that that's true. And he's looking good, man. I mean, he looks like one of the best players in the country.
Absolutely. And I think obviously what you said, Nick, about working inside out, that's So, when you think of like offensive game planning from a general team's perspective, if we can get the ball into our post and then kick out for a three, those shots have a way higher percentage of going in than just a guard off the dribble, like shooting a three, right? Because that inside out look. And I think the same thing is true for Nate, because it feels like to me, it seems like he is also shooting the ball better from the 3-point line since he started doing that. And so I wonder if his whole game is just improving all across the board because he's kind of refocused on this is what I'm good at and I'm going to start here. Jeff, what do you think about that?
I was just going to say that whatever the case may be, maybe we can't. It'd be fun to go back and watch those 3 games again and see if you could see an on-court moment or kind of like, oh, that right there rattled him into kind of a different approach. But since I'm so rough on him so often, Barnes built the team to play inside out this year. He did build the team that way. And he said all along in a way that's, in contrast to what we're used to seeing him do when players are disappointing. He has said all along, Nate's going to figure it out. He's going to be fine. Whatever version of that, happens press conference to press conference. So I'll give Deacon Rick his props. This is what he wanted apparently from his roster. And these are early returns. This is where I'm so like battered Vol, because, I could totally see this all falling apart the next game. But if these early returns are indicative of a trend, Deacon Rick called his shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in this Bama game, we again had free throws and turnovers late in the game that really were not, they weren't obviously detrimental because you won the game, but there was moments where that game could have easily gone Bama's way if Bama would have been able to capitalize, because Tennessee's just leaving the door cracked open. It feels like every game that's close because we're not consistent on free throw line, and Jacoby Gillespie primarily is not taking care of the ball in late game situations. So I don't want to spend too much time there because we talked a lot about that with the Georgia game, but that was just another thing that came up in this game. And I'm just tired of seeing it. I'm tired of seeing our guards not make free throws and turn the ball over late in the game. And you're not going to win in March. You're not going to make a run to the Sweet 16 or whatever this team's ceiling is. You're not going to get there if you're doing that when it comes to the NCAA tournament. The last thing about this Bama game, yeah, go ahead.
I think Joe had his hand up. One thing to throw onto that Bama game before you move on, but go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was just going to ask, like, it's already seems well established that it's the problem. So what's the solution? How do you get these free throws and turnovers, these late game situations where I agree Tennessee's leaving the door open? How do you fix the problem?
Well, free throws
Joe,
is just repetitions.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say. We talked about when you weren't with us these last couple of weeks, and that was just that free throws should be something that happens, prior to the season. So frankly, at this point, it's not really anything mechanical or something like that you could do to fix the problem. I do think it's mental in some aspects. Like I think they could improve how they're shooting from the line by mentally focusing on that part of their game. But at this point, you just kind of are what you are, and that's something that has to happen, over the offseason for years and years. And there's not a ton you can do to change that in the moment. The turnovers aspect, obviously, there's 2 things there, and this sort of applies to free throws too. And that's that one, you cannot go on a scoring drought in the middle of the game and not put yourself in the situation where these possessions matter that much. The other thing that's more applicable, assuming that we're in that position, is that when you're in a late game situation and you're the point guard, you have to understand what's the absolute worst case scenario here? What's the, it's similar to a quarterback in football where they're saying, okay, the one thing I can't do right now is take a sack, right? Well, the one thing Jacoby Gillespie can't do right now is turn the ball over. Okay, if we get like tonight, we got a bad look from 3. Yeah, that wasn't ideal, but it's still better than turning the ball over. So we have to understand these are the things that I can't do. And really, turning the ball over is just non-negotiable late in the basketball game. You got to get a look, even if it's not a good look. You have to get a look because you guys know how it is. I mean, with as good as this team is at rebounding on offense, even if you take a terrible look, there's a good chance that one of our bigs comes up with the ball. Even if you take a terrible look, there's a chance you get fouled. There's just so many things that could come into play if you actually get a shot off. And turning the ball over is just the one thing you absolutely cannot do. So there has to be a little bit better wherewithal from Jacoby Gillespie late in games to say, okay, even if I can't create the play I want to create, even if we can't run the set that we're trying to run, I'm just not going to turn the ball over. I'm not going to let it in. I'm not going to let this possession end with me giving the ball to the other team. I'm going to shoot it. I'm going to, do something with it other than that.
I guess I would take just a slightly different angle on this, Mac. I actually do think you can improve in season as a free throw shooter, but you do it the way that you should have been doing it over the course of your career. You have to say, I'm going to give extra time to this. And particularly for the guards, I'm not leaving the gym till I make 50 or whatever that is. I think that actually, even more than the muscle memory part of it, does what you said about it brings mental focus to the importance of the shot. So I think like I don't know how these guys spend their time. I don't know what time they have available, but yeah, I do think you could actually kind of rededicate yourself to free throws and see a mid-season return to or uptick in performance. I don't know if they would do that, but I do think that's possible. The thing with Jacoby is also very similar to what you said about free throws, though. It's hard to figure out how to change the guy because whatever he's been doing got him to be the starting point guard for the Tennessee Volunteers with what I assume is a pretty decent NIL deal. And the only thing I think, Joe, to answer your question, the only thing I think you could do as a coach, and I don't know that we have the depth to try it, is you would take him off the primary ball handler in a couple important situations. And you don't even have to say, I don't trust you. You just, I don't know if I would have the guts to do it, but Boswell has the ball in important game scenarios. Or the next time Jacoby does something stupid, you make that switch and you do that a couple of times till he gets the unspoken message. I just don't know if you can do it in the midst of SEC play. But those are kind of your only hope if you felt it was a big enough problem to try to address it.
Yeah.
Mac,
So sorry.
the thing before we leave the Alabama game, the other thing that was uncharacteristic of Tennessee in the Alabama game is that we didn't rebound the ball well. And the reason for that, I think, is because you have an NBA player on the court who immediately made, maybe not in the counting stats, but that first dunk he had, the first time he touched the ball and he dunked the snot out of it, that arena went nuts. They'd already cheered for him like he was returning from beating cancer or something. But he just changed the game. I mean, he literally changed what Tennessee does every time they play other college teams. And I don't want to beat the dead horse, but I just have to note how disgusting it is to watch that happen. Nate Oates is probably the scummiest coach in major college athletics at this point. And he got what he wanted. Now Tennessee overcame it, and that's incredible. But just having to deal with it is truly stomach turning. The NCAA got the judge who gave him clearance to recuse himself as having a conflict of interest, but not before the guy provided him like another 10-day window for what's his name, Betelacco or whatever.
Bediako.
He's going to get to play like 3 more games because whether they could get together to have the court decision because of bad weather, but they can get together to issue an extension of the injunction. This has got to be changed. It literally changed the entire dynamic of that game. It altered Tennessee's identity, and it shouldn't be allowed to be going on. I think everybody's there, but you just can't not talk about how it altered things at a fundamental level in Alabama's, to the Alabama's advantage.
Yeah, if they're not going to change it, then I'm just saying Dalton Connect asked for a trade today, and we'd love to see him in orange and white again. So just come on home, Dalton.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to touch on with the Bama game was the stark contrast in Rick Barnes' coaching decisions between the Kentucky game and Saturday night against Bama. We saw Bishop Oswald get 2 fouls late in the first half against Kentucky. and also Jacoby Gillespie and Rick Barnes pulled both those guys out for the last 5 minutes, and the momentum in that game just flipped. It's not necessarily why you lost the game, but it felt like it had a big impact. And then the exact opposite thing happened against Bama on Saturday night. So I thought that was worth us talking about, at least just for a minute. Do you guys think that was an example of Rick Barnes learning from that decision and making a different one? Or was it just because of the reality that Ethan Berg was playing so terribly? Because he did sub Bishop Boswell out when he got that second foul, put in Ethan Berg, but Ethan Berg looked completely lost. And Rick Barnes was chewing him out on his way back to the bench and put Bishop Boswell right back in. So you guys think that was more of a Rick changed his mind because of how bad Ethan Berg played, or was that Rick saying, you know what, I'm turning a new leaf, I'm going to leave my better guys in there?
I thought it was Rick. I mean, we talked about this in our group chat. I was like, oh, Rick learned, right? But I heard Grant Ramey on the VolQuest podcast say it was because Berg was playing so terribly that Rick had to go back to Boswell quicker than he wanted. And so it blackpilled me a little bit. Like, I think Berg may have done us a favor by being terrible.
But I heard the same thing. And Grant Ramey asked him after the Kentucky game if he thought he'd have to change that way of thinking at some point. And Rick said, maybe I'll have to. And since Berg forced his hand and it worked out, maybe that'll be something that Rick can look back to and say, okay, it's not the end of the world to leave a guy in the first half with a few minutes left with 2 fouls. So
that's the best case scenario.
And to be clear, it is not. So as we move on here, we're going to go on to football. So listener, we are going to take the rest of this episode tonight to go ahead and discuss Tennessee's football season. We've already talked about this, obviously, quite a bit since the season ended, but we kind of have saved this nice bit of meat here for you guys because we want to talk about just the season as a whole. And we didn't want to do that.
Wing for you.
Exactly. We didn't want to do that prior to the bowl game because we wanted to focus on that. Look at the idiots here. So we are going to recap Tennessee's whole season. So I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you already know this, but Tennessee finished the 2025 season 8-4 in the regular season. Our losses came from Georgia, Bama, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt. So guys, let's just go ahead and jump into what was the highlight and low light. What was the most memorable part of the 2025 season for you guys? Nick, let's start with you.
I mean, even though they were incredibly bad, it's got to be beating Florida in the swamp and getting that monkey off your back. I mean, you know, for people that aren't Tennessee and Florida fans, they would think that that's ridiculous probably because Florida was, I think, the worst team in the SEC this year. If it's not them, it's Mississippi State. But if you know anything about this rivalry, you will know that there have been plenty of Tennessee teams that were much better than Florida teams that lost in the swamp and also in Neyland. And so to me, the highlight was definitely beating them in the swamp. I wish that they would have extended Billy Napier and given him a longer contract after that. But alas, they did not. So Sunbelt Billy had to go, unfortunately. But that was the highlight for me.
Yeah, Joe, what about you, man?
I mean, I guess mine's kind of in a similar vein, but it's hard for me not to pick, winning at Mississippi State on the road. Obviously, we were all there. And, just watching the guys, keep fighting the game, just, they had so many opportunities to just sort of lay down. And like we've seen them do so many times in the past on the road, against, again, kind of like what Nick was saying, against worse talent. They're bad. It's not a great opponent, but we've just seen them so many times on the road just quit, and they just didn't quit. They kept getting after it, and they played 60 minutes of football and then some, and found a way to walk out of a hostile road environment with a win. We got to be there. Our curse was lifted. It was a night of exaltation. Of course, things in the season didn't end the way we wanted them to end or the way we thought they might end that night. But it was a great night. And it's one that I'll remember for a long time. So,
Jeff?
So I'm just checking my chronology. It can't be the day they announced that Tim Banks was fired. That would not
It
be.
can be.
It
It
can
can
Yeah.
be.
be.
It can be.
Okay. Well, that would be the thing I'm going to remember most about this season, which actually isn't true. I'm actually with Joe, and it largely is personal because we broke the curse there. But I actually think that I mean, did Tennessee ever look better in the season? You might say Georgia, and I understand why. But that last drive where Joey's moving the ball, he's got command of the offense. Brazel makes that great catch against Mississippi State that's clutch. Deshaun has that great run. They're blocking like crazy for him. Like
Braylon
that.
Staley had the fourth down pickup.
Yeah, Braylon Staley had that great catch. I mean, that was probably the pinnacle of Tennessee football in a drive for the season. For the reasons Joe's talking about too, like they're doing it on the road in a pretty loud environment. That was just. I'm glad we got to see it live. I'm glad I got to go back and rewatch it on video, and that's the defining set of downs for this season for me, in the positive sense. I've got some negatives, but yeah, that's the best part.
No, absolutely. I think what Nick said and what you guys are saying is definitely the highlight. And obviously, it's personal for us because we were there. But I think that's probably the one of those two things is probably the highlight for every Tennessee fan. Unless, of course, they have a personal maybe the Syracuse game because they were there or something like that. But I think those two games are the two games that you obviously Florida was a game you needed to win because of the history and the many years of sucking when we go down there and losing games that we shouldn't lose. And so I think objectively that's probably the most meaningful thing. But the Mississippi State game was just such a fun game. Just, if I was not a Tennessee fan and I was just watching college football on a Saturday, that would have been a game that would have caught my attention. Obviously, the Tennessee Florida game was not that game. So I think that holds a lot of weight for me as well. So I think I lean the Mississippi State game being the more fun experience, the thing I'll remember most. But that's, again, probably gets the nod just because I was there. But I think both answers are perfectly acceptable and really good. Let's go on to the negative. Jeff, why don't you start us off? What do you hope to forget from the 2025 season?
All right, listen,
Well-
man. Hang on. It's low light, singular. You got to pick one thing, the worst thing all year.
Oh, I see. I thought you were correcting me. I was like, did I say lowlights plural?
No,
I was like, what in the world?
I know Jeff was about to rattle off the 8 things he hated the most this season.
TIMBANKS. That is 8. I don't think we're agreed on this, and Mac, I think you and I particularly aren't agreed on this. It's still in my mind, and I feel probably more strongly about it now that we shouldn't have lost to Oklahoma. Like I can, you were ahead of me on being like, no, this Vandy team probably is going to beat us and should beat us on paper even. I've kind of come to that place, but I just look back at that Oklahoma game as low hanging fruit that I know Josh wanted to win because it's Oklahoma and we couldn't do it. And everything was set up for us in that game to do it. And I actually think I probably feel better about the season if we just have the Oklahoma win. So
I'm biting my tongue because I hear you spell out Tim Banks, and yet now you're talking about the Oklahoma game, and the defense is the reason why we were in the Oklahoma game. Tim Banks is the reason why we even had a chance to win that game. The offense sucked in that game. So
he
that's
hates
the game
himself. He hates himself
I mean,
that he's picking this.
if that's the game you want to forget, I get it because that was a tough game. But Tim Banks was the reason we lost that one. But anyways,
yeah, I'm actually not going to push back really hard on that. I do think that's Josh's failure. I think Tim Banks was a major liability. But yeah, I'm even willing to grant that. Like that's ultimately on Josh, not just as the head coach, but as the guy who's supposed to be the offensive guru. So totally defer to you on that, man. I have no counter.
Joe, go ahead. What was your low light of the season? What do you hope to forget?
This is not a competition because we're talking about lowlights and the fewer the better. I don't know how anyone could not choose the pick six in the Alabama game. I mean, top to bottom, you talk about low light. I mean, pitiful play call. Absolutely, totally unfathomable. Indefensible play call. What is happening on the field right now? But then they run the play, and the tight end actually has some space, and Joey throws it behind him, and it's a pick six, which lost the game. I mean, that was the game. They
Terrible
had a chance
play call.
to.
Yeah.
Horrible play call. It's on the coaches, right? I think, but then also to add to the horridness of that 5 seconds of football, the total lack of execution, because he was open. It's a terrible play call, but he could have made the throw. It's a tight window, but you got to make the throw. He doesn't make the throw. He throws it, a yard behind him, and the guy breaks for a touchdown, and that was the game. I mean, that was your and your season really at that point, right? Like everything was kind of riding on that because we had that stretch where we had to win 2 out of 3, right? And they totally gave that one away to Alabama. So it was the epitome of, you're just looking at the team and going, what are we doing? Like, who, top to bottom, from coach to player and everything in between, just awful, awful, awful. And I'm going to have to think about it forever because my brother-in-law's an Alabama fan. So I'm sure I'm going to be reminded of it for years to come. But that's the one I'd like to throw.
To that point, as a low light, as long as college football exists and as long for the rest of our lives that we watch Tennessee football, that is a clip we're going to have to see again. So, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm still sticking with Oklahoma, but we're going to have our noses ground in that for the rest of time.
I hadn't even thought about that.
I mean, and here's the thing, man. We should. It's terrible. It's absolutely. I mean, even the announcers are just looking at go. What are we even supposed to say here? How do we defend Tennessee in this position? I don't even know what to say.
We'll never escape it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and follow that up.
I hated reliving that. That was horrible. And Jeff, your addition made it worse. All right, Nick, low light. What do you hope to forget me?
Well, there are not a ton of things that I loathe on this planet. I absolutely hate Florida. So anytime we beat them, that's probably always going to be the highlight of my season. And just right behind them is Alabama. I hate them so much. My skin crawls at everything related to that program. And so the highlight for me is being Florida. The low light is the pick six. It was, as soon as I read your show notes, it was like I debated on the highlight. I did not debate, because of the Mississippi State thing. I was kind of like, but then I was like, nah, I hate Florida so much. But the low light, I didn't have to think twice about it. It was the pick six at Bama for me. The season died in my mind at that moment.
No, I mean, I think objectively that's the right answer. It felt like that was just like Joe kind of said. It felt like your season was just deflated in that moment, and it was classic Tennessee. We're knocking on the door, about to score. It's also just the added salt in the wound of you're on the goal line. It's a 99-yard pick six. It's not like we were backed up on our own 20. Right. I mean, it was classic snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, which Tennessee has found so many ways to do in our whole life. It was just horrible. Jeff, what were you going to say?
Well, is that your pick?
I will pick something different just to have another thing in the hopper, but go ahead.
Well, I want to hear what yours is because the comment kind of hinges on it.
Okay. Well, mine's a little more personal, but also I think so. My low light of the season is having to watch Max Gilbert's dad comfort him after the Mississippi State game, and then feel better. Like, man, you know what? Max is a good kid, comes from a good family, and then have to live with myself for the rest of the season as I continue to despise him as he misses kick after kick after kick. It's like, what does that say about me? I had this emotional connection getting to watch a father and son, watching a father comfort his son. And I just turned the next day and I was like, you know what? Screw that guy. I can't stand this dude. Start making your field goals, bro.
Got one job.
Well,
He'll start
actually,
making them now.
stop making them. Stop making them. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say he'll start making them now.
Yeah, against us. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, really, you got to where I was curious there because nobody talked about Max Gilbert missing a field goal to beat Georgia, kicking on third down. You know, think about how bad the season was that didn't make our list.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that one's all on Heupel to me.
Yeah. It was horrible.
Max,
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if it makes you feel better, I lied to that boy's daddy because I was like, "Hey, you tell Max to keep his chin up. We're still cheering for him," and that lasted about 24 hours. I remembered
Get out
him.
of here, son. Oh, jeez. Yeah. I have nothing personal against Max Gilbert. I just hate everything he's ever done to me. So, anyways, so that's what I hope to forget, man.
I also thought a low light could have been Tennessee failing to cover on the opening drive against the bowl. So you had the lava.
Oh God, yeah, that's still fresh. Yeah, don't worry about that. All right, so guys, let's go ahead and go to something more positive. Who was your favorite player from this season? Nick, you start us off.
Man, I thought about this a lot. This is a tough pick for me. He definitely wasn't I know that the listeners will know this. He's not the best player on the team. I really just like Ty Redmond this year. I feel like he played really well in a tight spot where he had teammates that I think at this point we could probably say could have played some football and who didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of them who went to the NFL and one of them who left us to go to another program. And I just have a lot of respect for how hard he played, how much better he got. He just seems like a guy that puts his head down and tries to grind and get better. And so Ty Redmond, I think, was my favorite player from this season.
Nice. Jeff, what about you, man?
Yeah, I chewed on this one for a while too. I think Colton Hood, just having a 1-year hot streak, was a good candidate. He was like salvaged that part of the defense for us as far as it could be. Chris Brazzell really turned it on. I thought about him for a while. And I think Brazzell has a good chance to help us down the road by like being a productive NFL receiver. So just to round out my four kind of the things jumbling in my head. I'm just a big Deshaun Bishop guy. I have been since he took a bet on himself and came in. So it's just good to see him continue to capitalize on that bet. But I guess it's Braylon Staley for me. The kid, I mean, I know he had a great season, but the kid got better over the course of the season in a way that gives you a lot of hope for the future. Going back to that Mississippi State game, he muffed a punt, right? Or was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a punt. And then he had a big drop, and he rallied back to have that fourth down catch and just continued to be just steady Eddie out of the slot. He's not the slot that we dream of, which is Jalen Hyatt, but he is the sure-handed guy you can trust when they go to him. And I think it sets him up to be the kind of guy that Tennessee fans think about. In a way, we won't Colton Hood because we only had him for a year. And so it's Braylon Staley, and I just hope I hope that kid stays healthy. I hope he continues to mature at some kind of comparable pace. I just like him a lot, man. I like the way he goes about his business.
Yeah. Joe, what about you, man?
Well, I was really tempted to try to melt the whole podcast down
Boo Carter.
And pick Joey. Yeah, no, I have principles. I wouldn't pick Boo Carter. But to pick Joey just because he came in the most unorthodox and inopportune kind of way. And I thought he played, he played hard. He just didn't have, it, right? He didn't have everything.
A tumor too. Don't forget, right. He had a tumor on his arm.
Yeah, so there's those things to consider, but like I never really got watching him play. We wanted him to be more, and frankly, we thought he might actually be more at the beginning of the season. I think ultimately he played to the best of his abilities considering a lot of sort of the facts surrounding his coming into the program. And honestly, I just kind of dig that. I kind of dig a guy who just made the best of a difficult situation and really felt like he gave his all. But my favorite player of the year is, I'm piggybacking off of Jeff a little bit, but I have always also been a really big Deshaun Bishop fan. I like watching him run. I think he's got really good vision.
He's old school.
I think,
know you dig that.
yeah, he's old school. Yeah, he's a Pittsburgh Steeler kind of running back, and I like watching him play. I've always liked watching him play, and he fights for every yard. That Mississippi State run is, we were there obviously, so but that's going to be a big kind of memory from the year for me. So yeah, I'm going to go with Deshaun Bishop.
Yeah, and I don't think Joey is a hot take, Joe. I think picking Joey is perfectly understandable and reasonable. I mean, he's your quarterback, right? I mean, you live or die by your quarterback, and I think Joey's a good leader. I think he played a good season, all things considered. And like you said, I think you said it perfectly. I think he played to the best of his ability with all things considered. I think my choice and what I would argue is kind of the most vanilla choice would be Chris Brazzell. I thought he was the most important player on the team. I really thought his improvement from last year to this year was astronomical. I love to see him, year two kind of take a big step, and it felt like not as significant as Jalen Hyatt, of course, because he didn't score 5 touchdowns against Alabama, but it had that feeling to it. And so it was just really easy to kind of cheer on Chris Brazzell. I think that's who I would go with. But, Jeff, basically everyone you mentioned, Jeff, I think is kind of on my radar as well. And then, Nick, I appreciated the Ty Redmond plug because I didn't want to bring up Colton Hood. Jeff did that. But Colton Hood did have kind of the highlight of the season for me personally, the specific play, because that pick 6 against Mississippi State, I mean, I lost my mind on that play. I mean, that just completely changed the trajectory of that game. And so I thought, all those guys did a really good job. And then I didn't even write down the least favorite player, like player that we want to forget, because we all have the same answer. So I didn't even think that was worth talking about, Max Gilbert. Will, let's go ahead and talk about. We've already touched on the bowl game.
Say Boo Carter, but
no, Boo can be on this team before Max can be on this team, man.
Hey Max, let me just quick hitter throw it to go around the horn on this. If we assume Joey is not coming back next year because of eligibility, I'm just curious what y'all think about this. My sense is that we got one great year of Jamad McCoy, and then he set out. He was injured, but then he set out. Joey, we did not get as great a comparable performance from, but we kind of got the best that he could give, right? I get the sense that Joey will be remembered more fondly than Jamad McCoy. I don't even know how you would define this, but I get the sense that like Jamad McCoy may not be a VFL in the fans' imagination, but Joey will. Do you think am I nuts?
I think you're spot on. I think that all the circumstances surrounding will he play, like the fans. I'm not saying that this is right or that it's wrong, but just the fact that we were always kind of waiting and expecting, and there was just never any delivery there. Whereas Joey was, kind of seemed like he was giving his all every week, and especially after the season, finding out about the health issues there, and that he was playing through
and the Nico
and stuff.
context.
And the Nico context, huge. I think all of those things will cement Joey as a VFL in a way that McCoy probably won't be. I agree.
Yeah, I just don't even know that it's a discussion, like, because the context of like the expectations were so little for Joey because of all the circumstances. As long as he's not a complete numbskull, everyone's going to love him because he's our quarterback. Like, quarterback's just such an important position.
That's a good point.
That it was going to be really hard for him to fail in terms of like how people remember him.
Well, I mean, he did throw the
And
pick six against Bama, though. Like,
right.
if it would
Well,
be
and
hard for him to fail,
he threw egregious picks against Oklahoma too,
yeah,
multiple.
that's true.
And so I'm like, he had a few games where he and the offense as a whole, but as the quarterback, I tend to blame the quarterback more than any other player if I have to blame someone on the offense. And he bears a lot of the blame for our failures this season. So, but I'm not trying to pile on him. I think what you're presenting as an argument is totally may be true, but I just don't know that it matters because you also have to think like, yeah, Jermod McCoy didn't play this year, but I think from a fan's perspective, we all feel better about Jermod McCoy than we do someone like Ricky Gibson. So to me, like Jermod McCoy has the iconic pick against Bama last year, and that kind of cemented his legacy, like it or lump it. Like you make an incredible pick six against Bama, you're probably going to go down in Vols history as someone who we like. And I think long term, people will remember Joey more than Jermod, but that's just because he's a quarterback, not because he actually is thought of more fondly, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I don't think anyone will. I think people will look back and remember Joey more, and I would say maybe even more fondly. But I don't think anyone will think about Mod negatively. I think it left a bad taste in our mouth now, but I think the percentage of people that will think negatively about Jermod McCoy is pretty low. Pretty low. I will not think
And
negatively about Jermod McCoy. I'm thankful for what he
50%
did.
of the volatile podcast.
Yeah, I negatively is kind of that's kind of a spectrum, right? I would think that the problem was we never really knew, right? And so there was this constant like, when will he be back? When will he be back? When will he be back?
Well, but also what Nick said earlier, Joe, is that like now with the coolness of time, it does seem like he was like, you know what, I'm gonna cash this NIL check, and I'm only gonna go like I'm gonna keep getting paid, but I'm not gonna contribute on the field, and I'm gonna go get my NFL money after that. Like I do think that is
Yeah.
a significant factor.
Yeah, again, that I don't think it's enough to be like people maybe to say he's not a VFL. That may be too strong, but I do think it negatively impacts the overall. I don't know. I may be using terms that are too strong here, but his legacy and the way that he's remembered. There will sort of be an asterisk there, or it will be lessened because of what you're describing, Jeff. And I think that there are a lot of people who would agree with that.
Well, I mean, at least the smartest ones, right, Joe?
That's right. That's right.
And best looking, yeah. All right, I'm sorry to derail. I just thought that was interesting as a thought experiment.
No, and I do think it is, but again, to me, it just gets skewed. Like quarterback is just its own kind of thing. I think if you compare Joey to other quarterbacks, then like does Joey have a better legacy compared to Jared Garantano? Does he have a better legacy compared to Jonathan Crompton, Tyler Bray? Like I think if you go through some lists of some quarterbacks who maybe had some pros and cons, like obviously pales in comparison to Hendon Hooker, right? Like no one's putting Joey in that class of quarterback. So, but I think, I wonder where I'd be curious more so where he falls amongst quarterbacks. But to me, Joey and Jermon McCoy kind of aren't, because I think especially let's just assume Deshaun Bishop has a similar year next year. People are going to think of him way higher than Joey Aguilar. And I think that's impressive because he's a running back. He's not even a quarterback, and so
just to in fairness to me, I was talking about guys who we had 1 year with.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure. I understand. Yeah.
And Jamad's 1 year as his position was much higher than Joey's. But I was just trying to think about that 1 year dynamic. I think, there's a good chance Jamad's a really good NFL player, and we'll always be happy for like the chest puff on that to be like, that's our guy. But I still just think that there will be more warm feelings in Neyland. It's impossible to quantify. But when those guys are brought back out on the field at some future game to get a pop from the crowd, I think there's just going to be more sentimental adoration for Joey. I just think that's how it is. And it doesn't matter. But that's kind of the thrust I'm driving at.
I'm just laughing now at the thought of like it's 2045 and they're like, and now your 20-year reunion of the 8-5 2025 Tennessee Volunteers and their quarterback.
They'll bring him out between quarters within the next 3 years. You know they will. Danny White will probably charge a fee to look at him. It will happen within the next 3 or 4 years.
I just want
Right.
to. I want to go back. I want to go back to the quarterback comparison for just a quick second because Jarrett Garantano gave us the best Mike, not Mike Gaff, but the best lip read of a Tennessee coach in my fandom. And who the blank told you to sneak? And I will forever be indebted to Jarrett Garantano for that. That is
I
peak
love
balls.
Jarrett Garantano, man.
But see,
Yeah,
but here,
I do
Nick,
too. I do too.
But that's all recent. See, that's the thing why I think it's interesting that it can never be answered, but it's interesting to talk about because 100% of our affection for Jarrett Garantano is finding out years later that despite being despised, he loves Tennessee football. And he's had this great redemptive arc because of his affections for the university. If we didn't know that, if he was like, yeah, I enjoyed my time at Tennessee, but that was kind of in my past, I want to move on from that. Joey is infinitely more beloved, but Garantano coming back to the table as a VFL at heart, if not, in resume, I think has made it a more interesting question. It's just all recency. It's not because of anything on the field.
I actually had a lot of affection for Garantano when he played on the field because
You're a liar. No, you didn't.
I really did because of how tough he was. And I always said, even when he was there, there's no one will remember this. We don't have chats from those days, but the way that he just always kept getting up and getting back under center, or after he would get pounded behind a terrible offensive line. He was frustrating. I definitely was mad at him a lot too, but I always respected how hard he played and that I always felt like he gave his all. He wasn't very good, but I always appreciated that about him anyways. Justin Worley was the same way. Justin Worley wasn't very good, but I always felt like a Worley bird just kept getting up and playing hard. So
I believe that because I trust your integrity. If anybody else on the face of the earth said that, I'd be like, bull. But I believe you. Yeah. I believe you.
I appreciate that because I am telling the truth.
Who the heck told you to sneak? That's just I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I love Jeremy Pruitt.
Last question I had about the details of, wins and losses and kind of memories of the season. When you look back, you think on this season, guys, do you think that you're going to remember this loss to Illinois as, impactful in any way, or you kind of forget that and think more about the Bama game and the Oklahoma game, things like that? Like, is that going to be a part of your memory of the season or no? Joe, go ahead.
It is, but maybe not for the reason that most people would expect, because I think the story of the entire season macroscopically, if we step out of just UT fandom for a second and look at the spectrum of college football, is that the entire landscape and topography of the game has changed with NIL and transfer portal stuff. And the SEC is no longer just dominant and have a stranglehold on the entire product as a whole. And so us losing to Illinois is a microcosm of what I think, and this may be premature, but next year if SEC teams dominate in every bowl game, and 4 of them are in the college football playoff and 3 of them have a chance to make a deep run, this year may just be a one year off fluke kind of a thing, and that's fine. But I don't think that's going to be the case. And if it's not the case, then our loss to Illinois is a sort of a microcosm of what I genuinely see as a changing of the guard in a new era of college football, where the playing field is as level as it's ever been between the conferences. And so it is significant. It is impactful. It's totally changed the way that I think about the game, but not from necessarily like a UT, fandom standpoint, but more from just a college football standpoint.
Joe, you're getting at my own thoughts here, and I know this is cheating, but I don't think Illinois can be evaluated in and of itself, because it's either a portend of the future or it will be something that's forgotten. So if Heupel flames out we're going to look at Illinois as, I mean, where I was when the game was over. We have hit Butch Jones level with Josh Heupel. We've found the ceiling. We need to move on. The program's in a better state. It's just, I was completely black-pilled on Josh Heupel. And this is where it's cheating. Josh Heupel then went out and made basically every move I thought he needed to make. All in on a huge defensive coordinator, all in on the strength coach that he hired away from a national champion, rebuilt his defense. I mean, I would quibble about maybe the quarterback choice, but like Heupel has approached this offseason the way that you would think he would have to have a productive future at Tennessee. I don't know if he survives. Like if he doesn't, I think I'm ahead of the sense of how hot his seat is. But if he doesn't win 8 games next year, it just may be like, oh yeah, Illinois should have told us. And it'd be hard to win 8 games next year. But if it turns around, I think we'll look back and somebody will mention Illinois and we'll all have forgotten about it and be like, oh yeah, can you remember that it was that bad? That's wild. I can't believe we were ever in that spot. And it'll just kind of be an afterthought. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Total cheat answer.
Yeah.
But I just think it's a historical. The answer to this is historical depending on how the future plays out.
Yeah. I see what you're saying there. That makes sense. But I also I don't know, Josh Heupel lost to Purdue a few years ago, and I don't feel like we spent a lot of time thinking about that. So I just.
Well, but see, that's because the program stayed on trajectory to get better for a long time. And I think that's actually a really good comparison, Mac, that we kind of look back and go, oh yeah, we lost to Purdue. And it's not really that big a deal. But I think if it doesn't go well from here, we'll look back and see Illinois as the bellwether.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying for sure. I guess what I was trying to say there is let's just say that we look better than we expect next year. That doesn't have to necessarily mean college football playoff. Let's just say whatever your expectations are, they meet those or maybe slightly surpass those. And let's say the next year we have a perfectly, but still 3 years from now, Josh Heupel gets fired. I don't know that if you have a couple acceptable seasons in between, I don't know that we're going to look back at Illinois and be like, yeah, that was the writing on the wall. Just like we don't currently look like right now, you're frustrated about the Illinois game. You haven't even mentioned the Purdue game because it's like, well, now that things have been okay, it just doesn't matter anymore. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, but things haven't just been okay. Like he's shown marked improvement going, sort of meeting and then exceeding expectations. I think, you had mentioned, Mac, that the Indiana national championship run is really bad for college football because it's going to totally shatter people's expectations on what it takes to kind of build a winning ethos and a winning program and how long that takes. That Signetti's done something that is not really realistic for most programs and most people in most places, right? And so that we've gotten so progressively better year after year after year, except now we're on the sort of downward slope. And so I don't know if you guys have thought this far ahead as to think, well, what would an acceptable season next year be? Does he got to win 8 games? Does he got to win 9 games? Does he got to make college football playoff? What's realistic? But I think that if we go on a series of 8 and 4s, which may be acceptable or realistic or kind of at expectation, considering some certain factors, it's still going to be Butch Jones level, right? Like he's still going to get fired, and I would say I think I would still say Illinois was the beginning of the end, right? Like that's we knew then, and we should have, hindsight's always going to be 2020, but I think there are going to be a lot of Tennessee fans who are like, well, we should just moved on from him 3 years ago because he was never going to be any better than 8 and 4.
Right. And Nick, I'm sorry. I know we haven't let you get in on this yet, but Joe, I have thought about it. And Kyler Kurbison raised a point that I think is interesting. He said that by hiring Jim Knowles, and it's accelerated by who they've brought in, but hiring Jim Knowles, you're expecting to be better 2 years from now. starting GMAC or Faison, you're expecting to be better 2 years from now. Hiring a great strength coach may make a dent this year, but you're expecting that to pay off long term. So what I'm now persuaded is Danny White wants to keep Josh Heupel for the benefit of program stability. And so what I imagine happened is there was a meeting who said, Josh, I've got your back. We're going to dump a ton of money into this. We're going to build long term here at Tennessee. And so that's why Heupel's willing to like throw a bag at Levitt, but then circle back to be like, okay, if we can't get Levitt, we'll start GMAC or Faison. Because I think that probably he's looking at a 2-year course of action. So like he plans to be nationally competitive 2 years from now. I think Kyler had a good point on that. So I have thought about how does Josh get to 2 years from now? And I think I'm a little ahead of how hot his seat is. But Danny White, I think also is on a hot seat with a lot of fans. I think that he may not be as secure as he thinks he is. And if Josh doesn't win 8 games next year, I think Josh can keep his job with 8 games under his belt next year, but he'll be on a pretty hot seat. And then if he was really planning for 2 years, then you can go just cool that seat right off by maybe making a run in the playoff or whatever. But if he doesn't win 8 games next year, which are really hard to come by, I'm not sure he and Danny get to do a 2-year plan. And y'all may totally disagree with that. But like, I do think this goes to the Illinois thing. 2 years from now, if we're in the playoffs and looking strong, I just think Illinois is a blip on the radar. If Josh wins 7 games and the fan base turns on Danny White because none of our programs are doing particularly well, and now Josh doesn't have the AD to cover for him and protect him, if Danny White feels like, oh, I've got to do something to save my own job, kind of the way probably that Heupel may have thought about Banks, like somebody's got to go on the altar for the way this season went. And if Danny White is forced to choose between his own job and Josh Heupel, I think Josh Heupel goes on the altar. Then we look at Illinois and go, yeah, like you just said, we probably should have pulled the plug quicker.
Nick, why don't you have anything to add, or are you good?
Yeah, I actually think the place I end up is pretty similar, but I am going to come at it from a little bit different of an angle. So I think that I think about the Illinois game in the same categories. I think about the Vanderbilt game. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's, to me, everybody's talking about, the Big Ten's as good, if not better, than the SEC now. And I think that there's definitely an argument to be made there. I think part of that phenomenon is that you have a lot of Big Ten teams that suddenly do have better talent, but who still may not overall have better talent. Like I think Tennessee is objectively a more talented football team than Illinois. To me, it's kind of an indictment on how a coach can keep a team motivated who clearly thought that they would make the college football playoff. And then when that goes out the window, how do you keep them engaged when there's probably about 20 to 25 guys on your team at any given year that are instantly about to check out because now they're just going to be waiting to go into the transfer portal. And so for me, the thing about next year is maybe there's enough roster turnover that you don't have a lot of the guys from before. And so maybe this kind of becomes a non-issue. Maybe next year's team will respond differently because you have a bunch of new guys. But if you have another season next year where you're about halfway through the season and it's pretty clear you're not going to make the playoff, how do you keep the wheels from falling off and going 6-6? Because I actually think that next year's team is probably on paper going to be definitely as good, if not better, than this year's team on paper, and they may have a worse record. I think they could even play better and perform more consistently and have a worse record. And so to me, it all depends. A big part of it is the eye test to me. Like at the end of the day, you have to make your predictions. Like, okay, does Josh Heupel keep his job if he goes 7-5? I think it's possible that he goes 7-5 and keeps his record, depending on how he goes 7-5 and depending on what everybody else looks like. But to me, that'll be the tell of how I think about the Illinois game because right now I'm viewing it as just like the Vanderbilt game. Well, once they lost the Oklahoma game, they cashed it in. And, so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. If they get down next year and they lose a couple games early, because they got some tough games early, or they just they open with Texas. And so, who's going to be a preseason top 5 team? Arch Manning's coming back. If they get throttled in that game, are they just going to cash it in? Do the wheels fall off, even though that they're, a better team? And that is a reason to get fired. That is a reason you get fired. I mean, Phil Fulmer got fired and had a pretty talented team that went 5-7. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it right now is how do you keep your guys motivated in the day of transfer portal and NIL when the goals that you set for yourself suddenly are not on the table? Because everybody knows at Tennessee, you have a goal every year to make the college football playoff. Whether that's a realistic expectation to put on yourself year in and year out, that's the expectation, especially because you just did it 2 years ago. And so if you, when that goal comes off the table, do you guys keep playing? And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. But I think that the end result is kind of where Jeff and Joe got to, which is that, like, do you look back and say that he wasn't able to last because he couldn't get to that second year because the wheels fell off because everybody decided they were going to go into the portal in September,
Yeah, I think that's really good, Nick. I hadn't really thought about it like that, and so I think that's a good addition. So I appreciate you sharing that. I think I'm left on the opposite side of the fence as y'all, though. Just to kind of wrap up on this subject, I feel like there's so many other games I'm gonna look back on and being like, these were the things that gave me the data points that Nick's talking about, and not the Illinois game. To me, it's just like
That's
bowl
fair.
games now. Like bowl games now just don't matter. And I wish they did, but they just don't. And so I just don't really care, frankly.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
of
they
course I'd like
mattered.
to win.
Clearly,
But
they
I
mattered
just
to this team. I mean, it's back to Nick's point. Like, Josh wanted to win that. He wanted Joey to keep the streak alive and set the passing record. He wanted to get Bishop over 1,000. Like, I think it mattered to him, and that's where it gets depressing because it mattered to him and he couldn't pull it off, which is, again, to Nick's point. And I'm not saying you're wrong, man, but I just think, like, it doesn't matter in the broad scope of things, but that game clearly mattered to the head coach.
Yeah, and I was thinking from a fan perspective, I'm thinking, like, as a fan, am I going to look back on this season and the bowl game move the needle for me in terms of like what I thought about it? And the answer to me is no. Like, the
Did you
season to
feel
me
that
was
way?
lost.
Did you feel that way in the moment after, as soon as the
No,
final whistle?
no, I was just pissed. I obviously was pissed we lost, but like, I didn't think in the moment, like, oh, this really sucks. I really thought about, like, man, this team really blew it against Georgia. They really blew it against Bama. They really blew it against Oklahoma. And now I have to, like, and now, of course, we blow it against this Big Ten team because they've shown at
That's what we do.
every turn. Yeah, when they play anyone of quality, they lose. I mean, again, we didn't beat a ranked opponent all year. It's not like this team beat anybody of. They had some meaningful wins for us because we beat Florida and we never beat Florida. They beat Mississippi State and we were at Mississippi State. Outside of that, though, personal, like, fanhood stuff, they didn't win a game that mattered at all. So them losing the bowl game didn't matter to me in terms of, does it change my opinion about the season, win or lose? The answer was always no. So anyways, I think we had good discussion there. We're gonna talk about probably the most important discussion that we've yet to have, that we've been wanting and dying to have, and that is thinking about preseason expectations from the 2025 season, and how those changed when we transitioned from Nico and to Joey, and then also arguing about should those expectations be changing throughout the season. So we're going to talk about that next week, along with some baseball. We're going to preview the Vols baseball season. We'll also talk about basketball in the meantime. Nick, why don't you go ahead and plug our socials, and then we'll get out of here, bud.
Absolutely. Listener, we appreciate you hanging on, listening this long. Tell your friends that those poor souls that pull for the orange and white, that are sick and on their deathbeds and are begging their loved ones to gather around and sing Rocky Top along with them as they fade into nothingness. Please tell them to find us on Spotify and to find us on Apple Podcasts and to find us on YouTube. And you can also follow us on X. We are at @volatile_1998. You will find us in the dead marshes there together, watching a Max Gilbert kick sail off wide right as you fade into oblivion. Please like and subscribe so that you can go through this hell with us.
Yeah. Wow, that was great.
Well done.
I was actually about to end the show by saying we were glad to have Joe back this week, but now it just feels like now it feels like bad timing. But Joe, we were glad to have you back this week, man, and we've been praying for you. We're sorry for what your family's been going through, but we're glad you're here. Remember, Vols fans, it is terminal. So we'll see you next time.